Today we are going to interview Gerhard Pietersen. Gerhard is an integral executive coach. He does work with the Graduate School of Business, the Center of Coaching, and involved in mentoring other coaches as well. Welcome, Gerhard.
Thank you very much, Dalton. I feel welcome here in Cape Town. Thanks.
Gerhard, so that title, Integral Executive Coach, it's a mouthful. Can you describe what it is that you do?
Right, so the executive part's probably the easier part to start with. So that is basically coaching high performance leaders in companies and organizations. And then the integral part is the philosophy and the approach. So you have different kinds of coaches. You would have a business coach and you would have a normal life coach who coaches you.
So you're not a life coach?
Well, I can be, but the integral approach basically looks at the human being and organizations from a systemic point of view. So we have a holistic, broad view of how we approach a person or a team or an organization, and that is called integral. So as one is part of your coaching journey is also to help people through a development program. And the development program must be integrally related to the change we want to see in the leadership, and that's basically why we are integral. So there's a few organizations around the world who has this philosophy of coaching, and the Center for Coaching in Cape Town is connected to New Ventures West in San Francisco, and they are basically the flagship bearers for integral philosophy and coaching and psychology in the world.
Okay, we will go back to philosophy later. What are some of your observations of the struggles that leaders are having in corporate? Do you have any examples? What are you typically seeing, some of the struggles that you're observing?
Right. Yeah, I think people can write books full of it. If I can try to simplify things, I heard the slogan yesterday during a seminar. It was called The Collapse of Attention. So we have so many things to attend to at the same time. There's so many challenges that we are suffering from change fatigue. And that basically ties into people's attention span, the ability to stay focused on the path. And nowadays it's not so uncommon to see attention deficit among adults. We only think it's a childhood problem. And then in the South African context, obviously in corporations with workers and leaders, we are dealing straight away with trauma, which is very peculiar to the South African context. So the people that we receive in our buildings, the people in our boardrooms, all have either a primary or secondary experience with trauma somewhere that has happened. And then I think the third challenge is very unique also to the South African environment, but is intercultural relationships, interracial relationships, dealing with diversity. Those are the challenges that I think that we work with, yeah.
No, it's interesting. You're saying trauma for your executive, and it's probably masked. You're showing up at your business, you're leading a department, you need to perform. It's almost no time to deal with the trauma. Would you say that that's a good assessment?
Yeah, and it's trauma.
Or unaware of it,
right?
Its impact.
Yeah, and that's the key word is awareness. So the people around us are not aware of it because we've learned how to socially mask it. And there's different kinds of trauma. There's job loss trauma. There's children not getting work trauma, having to move out of the house, but they're not really moving on. So there's the trauma of violence that's impacting on people. There's the trauma of loss, losing a loved one. There's unresolved grief because of that. So sometimes there's also just the trauma of expectations that never realized that people have to deal with on a daily basis. So, it ties up at the end of the day onto a lot of unresolved stuff. And because we have so many things to do during a day, there's not really time to attend to this. And so it impacts on the way that we respond to challenges that comes on our table. It impacts on the way that we relate to people, that we relate to stress. So there's various ways how we can see how it actually impacts on everyone. Yeah.
I remember when working with you, I think one of the things that I learned is you helped me to understand my own complexities, and you never gave me the answer. You never tried to solve those complex issues of the soul, so to speak.
Yeah.
And what I found with you was you were applying a framework, and you were steering me to find answers. Right. I appreciated that process because it got me thinking about some of these complex issues. Could you share a bit about your method and your process and your framework that you were applying on me?
The integral approach helps to shape the coach in a way. Obviously, there's an art to coaching as well, and there's a skill. And so the skill you learn with time and the hours that go into it and the various contexts that's in it. The art side of it is very intuitive. But I think the basis of it is really to see the human being that sits in front of you and is to become present to them. So a very important part of being a coach is the ability to be present, the ability to step out of the way and to create a safe container where people actually feel held with all their complexities and with all the paradoxes of life that they have to deal with, because there's someone present to us. Now, normally when people phone us to make an appointment with us, it's to get something from us. So in the coaching environment, it's the coach giving something back, and that is listening, that is helping you to reflect, that's standing back. And then a very important conversation, obviously, is the me conversation. So the me conversation is, I cannot see myself, and the coach helped me to see parts of it that's hidden to me. He helps me to bring up things that I really cannot see on a daily basis, or she. And so the coach would offer that space of deep presence to me that actually brings forth these things. So there are coaches that's very results driven, that will focus on the end goal, and sometimes there's really a need for that. But when we start off in a coaching process, it's important for me to find out who's this person that lives in this skin. What does life look like for them? What is it like to live in his or her skin? So there's a whole thing about a conversation for understanding that needs to happen first, because inside of us there's still an essential self. This is challenging to hear this because we live in an artificial intelligent world where everything is becoming artificial. The pendulum is swinging that way at the moment in the world, but what's going to happen is the need and the hunger, the longing to know what is the essence of things, including myself, including spiritual truths that's out there. Where do I belong? How do I fit into life? Where am I heading? Where is everything heading? Those kind of questions will become more and more important for us. How do I engage with people in a real way that's not directed by a robot somewhere? You know, one of the big challenges for us today is you go on a portal and you have to type in, am I a robot or not?
Yeah.
And then a robot has to tell you if you're a robot or not.
Yeah.
And so I just think that presence allow you to connect with yourself. And that's what the coach is bringing forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back to our experience in working with you. So you meet me the first time, and then it's obviously a mask, and you're penetrating. You're penetrating through that. And but what I do remember, I needed to get to that space and spending time with you to get comfortable, because you talk about surface things. It's easy to do that.
Right.
You know, so I'm meeting with a coach. I need this. I want this outcome. But I find in working with you is really penetrating through the mask.
Yeah.
And getting me to think through things.
Right.
Right.
So that mask that you talk about, the coach knows that the framework that you asked about in the beginning, that mask is a story. And there's a narrative that shaped that story and that shaped that mask on how you present yourself to the world and how you show up into the world. So the coaching conversation is going to help best when we unpack what is behind that mask, when we unpack the narrative. So that the things that block you and the things that get you stuck is identified, and we can take that out of the way, and we can start focus on this new narrative.
Yeah.
Without the mask. So getting to that place of the essential self, that's important.
Yeah, and I just want to look from the executive's perspective or the corporate leader's perspective. He has a scorecard. He has demands. So often I really don't have time to sit with you for 2 hours a week. You know what I mean? That's typically what they would say. The demands are just too much. But what I found, again, working with you, in spending that time committed to the process, or the framework that you speak about, I was able to lead my people better. I was able to get more productivity by first understanding myself. It gave me an awareness, and so that when I'm dealing with other people, I also get them to be aware. And eventually the productivity increases. And I mean, we have to understand, I often say this in our videos, listen, there's a bottom line. You're a going concern, you need to be profitable. So let's understand that. But I don't think there needs to be a tension. What I've seen is that as I grew in awareness, I was able to be more aware of my people, and productivity increases. Have you seen those kind of results in the people that you've worked with? Well, besides, I mean, using myself as an example.
Well, I mean, it's great to hear that.
Yeah.
It's great to hear the impact, not just on you, but also on people. And that's because your presence is shifting, because you're more self-aware of things that triggers you. But because you are self-aware, you can re-steer and reorientate yourself. It's like the ancient art of Aikido, you know? It's making your opponent to fall down, and that's what conflict does. But it's all about how do I get up and how do I respond from that. So we will still be triggered. It's going to happen. We are still human beings. It's not like you go for coaching and the coach that sits with you is not a human being. But the ability to become self-aware and how we get ourselves back into that. And what you are saying is, I saw that it's making a difference on the people around me. It's because your presence is actually the thing that's starting to shift. If I walk into a room and I'm tense, and I'm focused and I'm unengaged with people, it's going to have an effect on them. So how do I create a space where people can grow? And that's the main thing about leadership, is about unlocking potential in people and the processes that we're there.
I've seen the importance of that constant awareness and constant developing and that awareness. Would you say that's a fair assessment? That doesn't ever stop.
Oh, absolutely. If I can take an example from my garden, I had to, unfortunately, bring down a very old tree in the garden. It's very old, and then cut off the trunk, and then slice the trunk into smaller pieces. But the beauty of that tree, when you slice it down, every piece, you see the rings of transitions that tree has had to go through throughout the years. And some of those transitions are wider than others. Sometimes you can see there was a flood, sometimes you can see there was a drought, there was even a fire, and there's winding as well, but there was growth. And I think that's the thing about leadership, is you move through transitions. And the coach is someone who will support you through that transition, helping you to understand what is this about, because in each transition, Dalton, there's always an invitation. And that invitation is that still small voice in us that is inviting us into doing and being something new and find a new approach. Because life is also about the calling that's like this golden thread throughout the transition.
Sure. Fascinating. I think we could talk for hours about this, but just for our audience sake, is there some words of encouragement to leaders out there? I mean, we understand the tensions that they experience, the need for bottom line, but could you maybe just give a few words of encouragement for leaders out there in corporate?
Yeah, I think I love to speak in metaphors, so it's easy to speak. So to use the metaphor of, in South Africa, we love braaiing. So you've got to find a source that gives you energy and gives you life. And I have this coal chimney at home, and so I put my fire lighters at the bottom. And the thing about the coal chimney, it has got air holes alongside this iron casted coal chimney, and then I put the coals in, and then I light it up. And so what's important there is I have enough structure for this heat to burn up and to have these coals that keeps on burning, so that I can in the end put a meal forward that nurtures people. But it needs that air. It needs that air holes in it so that I can breathe. And so the thing is like, what gives you fire? What is the fire that is burning in the belly? And how do you nurture that? How do you give that oxygen? And my invitation for leaders outside is pay attention to the things that give you life, and that provides a good go forward for you in life, and that provides that sense of support and the conversations that's deep enough for you to make you to have a fulfilled life and to deal with life's many challenges that's out there. Look after ourselves.
Yeah, thank you. This was fascinating. Thanks for
Thank
your
you
time.
very much.
And to our audience, remember we are relational and not transactional.